From Buffalo Toronto Public Media and WBFO, this is What's Next Producers Picks. Highlights of conversations heard on our previous shows. On this week's episode, we'll hear from Asian American and former president of the Chinese Club of Western New York, Yanhong Baranski, founder of Conscious Environment Creation and Say What podcast, Ryan Howze. And we'll hear from civil rights attorney with the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo, Nicholas Ramirez. First off, during Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, I had a conversation with Yanhong Baranski, an Asian American member of the Buffalo community who served as president of the Chinese Club of Western New York. While president of the group, Yanhong was honored with a proclamation for her work to dispel racial bias against Asian Americans in Western New York.
But now you are a Buffalonian. You've been living here now for how long again?
So since 1917. So
Okay.
August 1st, we moved here to Buffalo.
Now you're a teacher, but before you were also, and still a member of the Chinese Club of Western New York.
Yes.
You were president at one point.
Yes. So I'm the former president of the Chinese Club of Western New York.
Mhm.
And I was president since 2019 to 2021 for 2 years. Now I'm still in the team. Yeah.
And the Chinese Club of Western New York doing some great things under your leadership. This was back in 2020, right? As we were entering the craze of the pandemic and COVID throughout the United States and back in China, the Chinese Club of Western New York donated $50,000 of PPE equipment for everyone here in Buffalo.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So actually, when my husband was working in China, in Beijing, and he came here for Christmas, December 2019, and he told me, oh, China's, everybody wearing masks, and I said, oh, not so serious, and here we are so safe. Buffalo has no, U.S. nobody wearing the mask, he said, really serious. I said,
oh, Yanhong, if I would have told you, a story had I traveled back in time.
Right.
We were waiting to experience in the next few months.
And then, then some, my friends and some Chinese doctor here and in Buffalo, they told me that's really seriously. So then, we, because at that time, at the end of January 2020, we have Chinese New Year. Every year we have Chinese New Year celebration. We have like a big performance at UB, Center for the Arts. And, we prepare for like half year, every year, for half year for the performance. It's a big,
Yeah, the Lunar New Year is a big thing.
Yes, big event for us. And then, unfortunately, we couldn't do that. We have to cancel in the last minute. So that's, I still feel bad because, the people, my friends, even my daughter, they prepared lots of performance. And unfortunately, we had to, stop
Everything
that.
stopped.
Yes. And then, I start thinking, because there's nowhere to buy the masks in the U.S. And so then, then I just start to ask the community. I said, could we donate some money? And only China has lots of masks. They are producing lots of masks. I said, let's buy some masks from China and donate to the local doctors, the hospital. We think, because at that time, everything shut down. The school shut down. Everybody go home, working at home. But the doctors cannot. Doctors, nurse,
Right.
and the people working in the hospital, they have to work.
Frontline
They have to
workers
fight
were
with
finding trouble getting
Right, they have to fight with the
equipment
COVID-19. At that time, there's no vaccine, nothing. Even people don't think about what's the COVID, I have even no name for the
Right.
virus. So then I start to arrange this and donation. So then I'm really appreciate my community. Within 2 months, we
$50,000.
Yes,
That's
yes.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's really nice. And also I contact with a Jewish community as well. And Mara, my friends, and Deborah, and I said, could you please send a link and for the donation link, to your community, let them to donate. So some Jewish community people donate too. And another my friends, she helped me to to
Organize and find
yes,
where to
yes,
mobilize all this,
right,
all
right.
these masks and
right.
scrubs.
So
and
I really appreciate my community. Within 2 months, we donate, like $50,000. That's not like at same time, So whenever we got some money, we got like 1,000, 2,000, and right away I buy mask from China because it takes time.
Yes.
And that time the shipping is really, bad.
and I remember the craze that everyone's once things started getting a little bit more serious here, everyone just started snatching up masks more than what they needed. So
I
it was
know.
hard to find.
Right.
Even as you mentioned, our frontline workers, our surgeons, our doctors, they were
Right.
having difficulties
Yes,
getting it.
yes. So I remember the first, we bought, the first parts of the mask, we bought from New York City actually. So there's like a 1,000 masks. We donate to the Buffalo Medical Group, and so for my, one of the Chinese doctor, Dr. Hwaaat, she introduced me to the director of the Buffalo Medical Group, and when I went. And I took the mask to the office, to the director office. I was surprised because the director wearing he's a gentleman. He wearing the pink mask, and it's made by the nurse because he used like a towel.
Oh, so it's smaller
There's no
size.
mask. They are in the hospital. Doctors had no mask, and he wearing the pink, and they have the CFO. He wearing the red, with flowers.
Yeah. You
Because
just have
everything
to-
from the towel.
You just find any
There's
kind
no
of
real mask.
mask.
I was surprised. I said, okay, here the-
handkerchief or anything just
Yes,
to cover at that
right,
time. I
right.
remember that. Yep.
And even the picture was on the newspaper. And so then, and after that, I left the hospital and I sit in my car.
It was tough. It was really tough because
Yeah, I cried because I said, that's really seriously. Nobody have mask, even the doctors, So they have to work. So I said, okay, let's ask the communities donate more money to give to the hospitals. We have to protect them. They are the real hero. They are fighting in the first line, to fight the virus. And we can stay at home, but they can't.
Right.
So I'm really appreciate my community. And the good thing, we really donate. We went to over 20 hospitals and nursing home. And also I remember once we went to ECMC hospital in the morning, and we have reporter came, from Buffalo News, and she came, and I was surprised, she wore the mask, and I always like a broken, teared mask,
Yeah.
And she said, oh, I have 2 masks, and I use 1 mask for 1 week. I hang in my basement and I use another one for 1 week, and I change for only 2 masks, for each for 1 week. Then I said, I give you a bag, like 20 masks. And I said, because you're a reporter, you have to go out
Right.
to interview people, and you need to protect yourself too.
People forget that life for some was still going on. We the vast majority of us got to stay indoors, work from home, but there were still frontline workers that were out there
Yes.
doing important work. It's great that you did this. You were honored by this. Was it the
Yes,
city of Buffalo?
because, yes, so I got that's really my honor, but it's not honor
you brought it.
myself, so I
That's
brought
fantastic.
yours from the mayor, so in
Byron
the
Brown,
Buffalo-
yes.
yeah,
City of Buffalo, County of Erie, State of New York, Executive Proclamation. Yanhong Baranski. This is fantastic. See, so Yanhong, I appreciate you bringing that in. I appreciate you telling that part of your story.
and also this one.
Oh, New York State Assembly Citation, National Federation for Just Community of Western New York Heroes Award. That's amazing. And Yanhong, we're gonna delve into this a little bit more, but I wanted to get also just your experience as an Asian American in Western New York. How would you describe that? Outside of the last 3 or 4 years that were very tumultuous and still continue to be for Asian Americans, what would you say is your experience with your identity, with your culture here in Buffalo?
Yeah, I'm so proud. I'm a Chinese. I'm from China. I'm Asian. I think everybody's different. Like you're.
I'm a Cuban American from Miami, Florida.
Yes, you see, I think because U.S. United States, because why this kind is so great? Because the people from different countries, so we put different culture together. Let's make this country more colorful. So I love culture. I love different cultures because like the person, if we look all the same, it's so boring, right?
Right.
Because we look different, have different color, have different face, and different, it's so different culture, different language. You can learn lots of things.
The food, don't forget
Yeah,
the
the
food.
food. Yes. I like not only the Chinese food, all kinds of food. I love it. So yes, so that's why United States, because that's why this country is so great, because the people are different. So made this country more stronger.
And as far as specifically though, in Western New York. How would you quantify the Chinese population out here, or the Asian American population?
We think, like Buffalo, they told us like over like 10,000.
Okay.
I think including the UB students. UB
I
has
see.
like 3,000, over 3,000
Oh, wow.
US, Chinese
Is there
students.
a particular reason?
And
Is there a
UB is a big,
program, or-
yeah, they have lots of programs, lots of Chinese students come here. Every year they have like over 500 new students, coming from China to study at UB. And I think other schools, but the UB is most.
You mentioned everything that took place after the start and in the midst of COVID. Unfortunately, in this country, in general, nationally, because of the previous administrations and some of the rhetoric and tone that they displayed, and with COVID and the blame that the Chinese nation is receiving for the spread of that, current geopolitical issues with China. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that there's been a rise in Asian American hatred here in the United States. Are you seeing that here in Western New York? If so, is it rising?
For me, I think Buffalo is very nice city. People so kindly, so lovely. So I don't feel that way. So maybe others, like a big city, let's happen. But the Buffalo, I don't feel. I'll be honestly.
Well, it's good to hear that, because I don't want to deal in hyperbole, but it's just and not so much here in New York City. You hear of
Yes,
incidences,
right? But Buffalo, no. So then
That's-
people complain about that. I say, okay, depends on where do you live, But it's happened in New York City, but not in Buffalo. I don't feel that way, so I should not complain about that,
Right.
So then I really feel Buffalo is really safe place, and people so kind, so nice, so friendly. So that's a very good place to live and raise the kids.
Yes, that's why I'm here as well.
Yeah, so then I start to teach. I love it, because back to China, my daughter was, in the internet school. I was teaching English for the Chinese parents at school. So we have very strong PTA. So then, I love to teach, and I said, why not? And I start to teach from 5th grade to 8th grade.
Teaching was a calling for you early on, or did you say, why not? Let's give it a whirl?
Yeah, just why not? So that's, yeah. Do it.
And so, as a teacher, as someone who also in your role in the Chinese Club of Western New York, you're an ambassador. You're bringing your heritage to another part of the world. Anything you can share of your culture that you love to.
Yes, yeah,
What's your favorite?
Yeah, then like today I
The
made
candy.
the
Definitely
candy,
the candy.
and also we made the dumplings. 饺子, we call 饺子 dumplings.
oh.
饺子, yes. Have you had 饺子before?
Yes.
Dumplings, yes. So then every year the school, we have the biggest fundraising we call the Dare to Dream for the Spanish school, and so then every year I say, okay, let's set up one of like I gave like the making dumplings for that, so then
Which is not easy. Dumplings
yes.
is not easy to
So
make.
while the parents and the god, win the, and so then the auction, so then I choose the first. They have a few, four kids in our school. So now I choose the oldest one. Oldest daughter, she's in the first grade. I think first grade is older, so they can make. So then today I brought like the dumpling skin, and the last night I made like a filling, like a ground pork with Chinese cabbage and some onion together, mixed together. I put some
yum.
soy sauce and some ingredients, for the dumplings, and then I brought to the school, and the kids love it. The first time, I said, how many kids, how many of you had a dumpling before? I said, yes, I had me. They really love dumplings, but they never made dumplings before.
They're not easy. You have to pinch and fold and
Yes,
and
right. I
fill it
showed
up.
them how to do it. They love it. And I brought my hot pot. My
Oh,
hot pot,
and you steam them in
yes,
in the,
that's like
wow.
an electric hot pot. So then I boil the water as I put this in my hot pot. There's two sides, because then we can eat like one side spicy, one side not spicy. I explained to them what's the hot pot. Then we use the hot pot, and then boil the dumplings. They love it. So then they made the different shape of the dumplings, and then they ate. They said, oh, so so delicious.
We're almost towards the end of our interview, but I wanted to ask, as president of the Chinese Club of Western New York, you received the National Federation for Just Communities Award in 2021, correct?
Yes. Right.
Can you talk about the work that you did to overcome racism, bias, and discrimination in the area?
Yeah, I think because our community is so grateful, we raised money for donate mask, and so I was the president, so then, but for me, not only me, I think this our community did this, our jobs, the people donate so much money, we could, buy the mask to, from China to donate to the local hospitals, So as Asian American, as a Chinese, American, so I'm really proud myself. And I think, because at that time people talking about like Wuhan virus, we don't agree for that, and we think, we are living here. We are in Buffalo. We belong to the U.S. We belong to Buffalo. We are local here. Doesn't matter where are you from. We are Buffaloan, right? So then, we should love the country. We should love the city, and this is a part of our life because we are living here. So that's why we have to protect ourselves. So then that's why our community, donate the money, and we buy, the mask and donate the mask to the local. And so we are not afraid to say, oh, because you're Chinese, the wire from China, I totally don't agree. And it doesn't matter I'm from China or not, but I'm living in Buffalo. So I belong to Buffalo. So we have to protect ourselves. So that's why we have to stand up to do something. So then we want to show people we are part of the American, we're part of Buffalo. So we have to love each other, help each other. Doesn't matter where I'm from, but we have to really help each other. So then that's what we did. 2020, 2021. So that's why they give me an award. And I'm really grateful for my community. This is all my community credit.
You made Buffalo your home. It's not your native home, but you've made it your home. And we're happy that you're a part of our home and have helped to do good within it. So thank you so much for all that you did and continue doing, because you're enriching, I think, those students' lives, teaching them a new language, teaching them a new culture, feeding them new foods that they probably haven't had before.
I'm so glad. I'm so happy I can, I'm grateful for Savannah School. We still continue to teach the Chinese language. I'm so happy to share my experience, my culture, my language. So then people know, and the students know better about Chinese culture. And I love to learn more other cultures too.
We got to get together and I'll teach you some. I'll teach you some everyday Spanish. You teach me some everyday Mandarin.
Yes,
and
Mandarin.
The dumplings. Yes,
dumplings,
you got to teach.
Right.
Next up on What's Next, Producer's Picks. After his child's Western New York school omitted Black History Month and other DEI initiatives from their teaching plans, Ryan Howze set off to create a curriculum and supplemental history podcast to address this need. This is how Conscious Environment Creation and the Say What podcast were born.
I'm here with Ryan Howze. He's the creator of Conscious Environment Creation, along with a companion podcast by the name of Say What? History.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I went over the top there, but I'm only doing branding. I'm trying to push the branding you've got, and when you start each podcast,
that's it. It's a show about Black history where we talk about some people that you know, talk about some people that you don't know, and talk about some events so crazy it'll make you say what.
I love it. Ryan, welcome to What's Next.
Thank you for having me.
As a fellow media professional, you were at one point a radio DJ, studied music, and now podcaster. Welcome for this home and home, I guess.
Yeah.
Ryan, you are the creator, the founder of Conscious Environment Creation. Can you give me a quick overview of what that is?
So what Conscious Environment Creation is a like DEI program that kind of morphed into focusing on K through 12 type education. So kind of gravitated and took from a lot of different pieces that I had, a lot of DEI background and structure and things like that. But how do we get kids to have a better understanding of what diversity is and have a better understanding of being inclusive to their classmates and things like that, understanding inequities and how to correct those things. Mm-hmm. And teaching through American history was a really good way to do it. So that's where kind of Say What history came from, was this idea of presenting Black American history in a way that was easily digestible for K through 12, but also presented it without sugarcoating it, and in a way that was able to have DEI features within it. So that's
Showing history with its blemishes and all.
yeah, exactly. What I found was that a lot of history being taught right now, or the way that certain states, counties, cities, whatever, are trying to reframe history, is that Black history isn't important, or it's something that we shouldn't be focused on or teaching, but Black history is American history. Leaving that part out, you leave out a huge part of history. And what a
It's
way
intertwined, and it's you can't divorce it from
exactly. And what
who
a
we
way,
are.
right? Exactly. And what a way to show to show students exactly what I was saying before. The diversity, equity, and inclusion can be shown through telling these stories of people that they've heard of, people that they haven't heard of, doing things that they're not used to seeing. Everybody knows Martin Luther King Jr. and the guy that did the Peanuts, and
George Washington Carver.
Yeah, and Rosa Parks sitting on a bus. Like there's those stories, but honestly, it almost feels like people don't even know those stories anymore. But there's so many stories that have happened that are triumphant, or Black history is much more than just enslavement and pain, and it isn't just people doing the same 9 inventions that we hear about every single year either. So there's so much more. We're talking about if we're talking from 1619, we're talking over 500 years, 400, 500 years of history that we're talking about.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right, exactly.
I think in your curriculum plan, you have, and I had to look him up because I wasn't familiar, but Onesimus.
Onesimus, yes. One of the first stories I start with, especially for kids right now, we're living post-pandemic world, and a lot of these kids are really familiar with like what a lockdown is, or what masks are, or what being able to go outside and get sick and get really sick is. So Onesimus came up with introduced to the Boston medical community the idea of inoculation, which was a primitive or a little less sophisticated than a vaccine way of treating virus. And the enslaved had been doing that because it was a practice in West Africa for centuries at that point. So once they realized that smallpox was ravishing the Boston area, the enslaved were doing what they always did, and they weren't getting sick. And it took a preacher, one preacher, and one doctor to actually listen to what Onesimus was saying as he was kind of speaking on behalf of the rest of his enslaved people, and saying, this is how we're doing it, this is what we do. It's called inoculation, this is how it works. And Boston eventually started to adopt inoculation, and their rate of death went from 1 in 7 down to 1 in 40. And then eventually it would take about 4 or 5 years before they would start to get a vaccine. Because the concept of having a small amount of the virus, or a weaker version of the virus, being introduced to your body creating antibodies, that's the basis of what a vaccine is. Right. So having that be top of mind and conscious, now doctors are working towards how do we do inoculation but make it safer, make it better, and then eventually they come up with a vaccine. The vaccine leads to us not having to talk about smallpox anymore. And a lot of people don't realize that was a group of Black enslaved people that taught the medical professionals at the time how to do that, or that was something that was viable. They showed them in practice that this is something that's viable. So Onesimus is probably one of my favorite stories to start off with, because when you start to talk about a pandemic, the kids know exactly what you're talking about.
They're like little experts at this point.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Well, it goes to show you my experience with the Florida school system and their version of Black History curriculum, and that was what, 90s, and we'll get to that fun little topic in a little bit. But it goes to characterize your curriculum. You're dealing with figures that aren't, I guess, quote unquote, commonplace in the grand curriculum of the United States.
Right.
You have a shirt on for those. It's an auditory medium, but Ryan's got a shirt that has King, Du Bois, X. I can't see. Fred Hampton is the last one.
Newton and Hampton.
And so you seem to delve into Black history, prickly parts and all.
Yes.
And that's how history should be, I feel like.
Yeah, there's a lot of beautiful, rich history that people kind of ignore. Like even when you're talking about Newton and Hampton, you're talking about the Black Panthers. There's this perception of what they were, and
my apologies for mischaracterizing it as prickly, but it's just
no.
In the general population, when you mention Black Panther movement and some of the more combative parts of Black history, people start getting, wait, we're talking Black Panthers.
But you're 100% right, because there have been throughout our history, even as recent as the late 80s to right now, we have this perception that has been handed down through curriculums and passed down to us through the school system, that these characters were bad people, or they were misguided. Malcolm X had a good idea, but he did it the wrong way. Fred Hampton had a good idea, but he did it the wrong way. It's always that, but they never talk about the Black Panthers having over 60 social programs that some of them we still use to this day. The Black Panthers came up with WIC. Like the Black Panthers came up with SNAP.
There's duality and there's nuance in every story, and I feel like I've said it here a number of times, but we don't do nuance as a country very well. So it's great that you're pushing this curriculum to a broader spectrum of Western New York. Now, how did your calling? What was the calling? What drove you to create conscious environment creation?
So we got to travel back a couple of years to when it started kind of appearing in my mind. I feel like a lot of people had the same kind of fed up moment, but it was really George Floyd that got me to a point where it wasn't necessarily George Floyd. It was the fallout after George Floyd, because that's when I started to realize that there's a lot of people that don't see the world the same way I do, that don't see oppression the same way I do, that don't understand those things, and they either don't want to or they don't know where to begin to understand those. So I started re-educating myself and diving into a lot of literature on, anti-racism literature, critical race theory, actual critical race theory. We could talk about that later.
It's a term that's thrown around a lot, and I feel like much like woke, a lot of the people that use it can't define it or where it's exactly from.
Exactly. And so reading about that, and it really just started with friends of mine, just teaching them. Like, they wanted me to, hey, you said something the other day when we were in the car, can you just write that up? And it started off, Conscious Environment started off as very long, like almost blog posts on Facebook. And then
the place where all intellectual discourse takes place nowadays.
Then it morphed into videos online, doing short form kind of video things to express and explain things to people, because I felt like I could say it in 2 minutes faster than I could type it for half an hour. And then it became more and more formal, and then eventually we get to me wanting to explain this through stories of history. So that's where Say What History kind of got born out of.
Wait, what got born?
It's the Say What History. It got born out of that, because really, this is a fun story. It was me coming down stairs after reading in my office for a while and coming down and going to my wife and go, "You'll never believe this." And then I tell her something that I just read that even I was like, I didn't know that this had happened in the United States. I didn't know that we did this. I didn't know that this court case existed, whatever. And then my wife was sitting at the dining room table. She's sitting there, and I go, "You'll never believe this." And I tell her, and this is probably the 10th day in a row that I had come downstairs and said something like this. And she goes, "What? No way. I can't believe that." And I was like, "Yeah, like that's what I feel like whenever I read this history." And that's where Say What history came from. It was history that, as I was reading it, I was like, "Well, how have I never learned this before? Why didn't I know this? Why aren't we teaching it like this?" Sure, it's blemishy, or it doesn't make early United States, early America look good at all, but it's what happened. So why don't we teach these things? And there's a lot of things that overcame. I think if you understand where we were, you can see where we're going. And you can see the distance that we've made with things like that. So, yeah, it started off in 2020 trying to do like kind of bloggy post things, and as I learned, I wanted to just share this information more, and it developed into a curriculum that could be. I wanted to just have like an easy package to hand a school or hand a teacher that felt like they weren't sure what to do or where to start. I don't think it's anybody's fault per se, but I think there are a lot of teachers that get nervous. Teachers have been under fire since 2020. I think a lot of teachers don't want to rock the boat. They don't, they
Educators already are in a tough place where they're not getting paid enough, or they're not getting enough respect sometimes that it's freedom to operate.
Right.
And it's just getting worse. It feels like on a national level, and also, I hate to say it, sometimes in a local sense.
Right.
Also, Ryan, I would be remiss not talking about another big event here in our city of Buffalo, the top May 14th racist shooting. Right. And we had direct relation to Catherine Massey. Is that correct?
Kat was my cousin. I remember that day because I was at my grandmother's house, and my grandmother it was her 90th birthday party.
Wow.
And we kept getting bits and pieces because I talk about, report on, do stuff with the news, with my social medias and things like that. So I'm always kind of a little in tune to what's happening, like in the news. And I saw that there was a shooting in Buffalo that was a big enough deal that it took over the news networks, but I didn't read into what it was. And then as the night progressed, I kept reading more and more about what was actually happening at the time, because Buffalo wasn't positive what was happening at the time. First it was a shooting, then it was a mass shooting, then it was the gunman was racist, he had a manifesto. All of this stuff appeared over the day. We were all here. But I was in talking to my grandmother, and it's gonna make me tear up. She just looked at me, and I was telling her what was happening, and she just sat there. She's looking at me, and she just goes, I thought we fought this so Yao didn't have to." And I was like, I don't know, Grandma. I don't know. And she goes, "Well, you gotta do something about it." And then she walked out of the room, and I don't think she meant it like this. I think she was kind of being flippant and just being sarcastic about it. But I took that to heart, and I wanted to do something about it. This is the only way I knew how, was through education, through teaching people. I feel like education is the best way to change the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we learn about great catastrophes that have happened throughout history, the first things that happen is they cut off education. They burn books. They change schools. They segregate schools. They do all kinds of stuff to get the masses not to be able to, one, have all the same information, and two, join together to push back against whatever the forces that be. And that's where I felt like I gotta get to the kids.
Ryan, thank you for sharing that truly personal moment. And I wanted to also give you a moment to speak on the memory of Catherine, anything that we should know about her.
I feel like if you're in Buffalo on the east side, you know who Catherine Massey is. She was a juggernaut. She fought for her community. She helped revitalize the Fruit Belt, and she was a writer. She just never stopped challenging things and pushing, and I've taken that to heart. It was like the next day that we learned that she had passed in the shooting, and we all knew people that lived over there. We were calling people all night, but we were calling Kat's sister to try to get we were calling Kat, and we were calling Kat's sister to try to get a hold of her, and nobody could for a while. So I remember my mother kind of thought the worst a little bit, but she didn't want to say it. And she called me the next morning. She goes, "I just got the call back," and yeah, Kat was there. So funeral services are soon. We'll make it there. But I think her legacy lives on in new activist groups, different groups that have taken this kind of like this intellectual not taking no for an answer kind of way. Like Kat was a wordsmith. Like she didn't she would make you feel amazing, but be correcting you the whole time, and at the end of it you thanked her.
Yeah.
And that's just it's just a way that she had about her, and I think that's an important thing to keep with the new activists, or the new people trying to change things as we can. We just have to keep pushing and just keep going. People will try to stop us all the time, but we have to just keep going.
For our final highlight, we hear from Nicholas Ramirez with the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo. Nicholas is an attorney that specializes in criminal law, but aids the public by advocating for and educating individuals in all things pertaining to social justice. We broke down a lot of the recent Supreme Court rulings on affirmative action, loan forgiveness, and the First Amendment case of 303 Creative LLC versus Elenis.
If you've been listening to the news as of late, there's been the SCOTUS has been busy. The Supreme Court of the United States has been very busy setting back, wiping clean decades of precedents that we had prior to this past week. And we'll get to them in detail or one way or another. But what was your feeling right off the bat after just, it felt like it was one hit after the other, bam, 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 bam. We have the affirmative action ruling. We had the 303 Creative versus Elenis freedom of speech, First Amendment case. and then we had the loan debt forgiveness ruling as well. What were your thoughts after all those concurrent rulings came by?
So a lot of disappointment. When I went to law school, I actually dreamed of one day being someone who argued in front of the Supreme Court. I, always tried to give benefit of the doubt to opinions I didn't agree with, to justices I didn't agree with, because I believed a lot of them were acting in good faith and trying to reach the just outcome. But I think a lot of us who felt that way 1 year of law school kind of evolved in our belief. And I think that hit me particularly hard with some of the cases in the last few years. And this term was no exception.
I can't gloss over the Roe v. Wade decision.
Yep.
Dobbs. It just, and even I was speaking with a gentleman last week about the 303 creative case, and we were waiting the ruling on that. I said to myself, I thought we had been over this one already with the Colorado cake maker. Let's start with that one because, to my knowledge, we had already kind of gone over the right to refuse business based on religious beliefs or free speech grounds. This was 303 Creative LLC versus Alanis, and it was a 6-3 in favor of 303. Christian web designer Lori Smith from Colorado refused to do business. Now, I want your expertise here because, to my knowledge, this was a hypothetical that was argued here. She refused to do business with LGBTQ plus clientele based on her religious beliefs, freedom of speech grounds. You can do that? You can have a fictitious litigant?
Well, kind of addressing that first point, no. It's called an advisory opinion. And generally in federal courts, you cannot seek an advisory opinion. It's because the courts have a limited power, or at least they're supposed to have a very limited power to determine case and controversies. And I think it's really important to look at the hypothetical here because I think it kind of informs a lot of the problems with the decision. So 303 Creative, it did kind of follow up on Masterpiece Cake Shop. Masterpiece Cake Shop, the court didn't decide the merits really of whether or not the cake decorator had this right. They really just kind of kicked it back saying, oh, well, the Colorado board made some comments about religion that show, maybe he didn't get a fair hearing. So, do the hearing again, give him a fair hearing. A lot of us at the time felt like that was really just the court trying to avoid the hard question because of just the circumstance of it. But, we took it for what it was. 303 Creative, and this is the problem with advisory opinion when you're talking hypotheticals. You don't have any facts to really look at to determine it. So you see this a lot in the opinion where you have Justice Gorsuch really, talking about this in the broadest terms of, oh, well, it's a message she doesn't agree with, and this is an individual, piece of art and such. Well, we don't know that. We don't know what the process actually is for designing websites because she's never done it. She's never designed a wedding website, period. And, we also see this in Justice Sotomayor's dissent where she's pointing to all the hypotheticals because she's like, we don't have anything to really root this in. And
basically you're suing the law. You're trying to make it absolve or get rid of the law so as to be able to then claim that you don't have to do business with said parties.
More you're trying to make an exception that pretty much anyone can use now because we don't have solid facts. So I think it was really demonstrative during the oral argument. Justice Jackson referred to, a Santa scene set in the 1950s. Well, could they say a black child can't be in it because, that's not part of their classic vision of, It's a Wonderful Life. And, it's like, how do you answer that considering this context? And I think that's one of the first problems you see with this decision is all these hypotheticals. There's no solid facts to root this in. It's also demonstrates a lot of the justices don't seem to have a firm grasp on discrimination law. Because in oral argument, you saw Justice Alito ask, well, would a black Santa be able to refuse to take pictures with a kid dressed in a KKK outfit? well, wearing a KKK outfit isn't a protected class. It's very
Right.
different from your skin color.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think anyone disputes that. And that's a lot of what you're seeing to justify the decision now is like, well, you guys don't have to make cakes for MAGA people. And it's like, well, no, you never had to. This was purely about a person's, person.
Do you think we'll go in that route?
I think it's inevitable because they didn't draw a line. They couldn't draw a line between race and, being gay or being trans. There's a reason you can't draw a line because those are all parts of who you are. And that's where we've understood a protected class to come from. So the decision doesn't even try to draw a line there. I think it's because to the justices, and it may seem obvious, like, no, that's obviously different. Refusing to bake a cake for a black couple or an interracial couple, it's obviously different than baking a cake for a gay couple, or designing a website for a gay couple is different from interracial or black couple. But how? I can't think of an answer to that. I don't think that they could either, and I think that's why it's absent in the opinion.
There's so much to delve into here. But we have two other monumental cases too, or rulings rather. First, let's do the fiscal side. The loan debt forgiveness ruling. Now, it's to my understanding that President Biden's going to try to fight this in one way or another using the 1965 Higher Learning Act, but he's got a long road ahead once again. Thoughts on this one?
This is one that really showed bad faith on the justice's part, in my opinion, because there was no injury here. So they took this argument from the state that the state had created this independent company to handle student loan servicing, and that company might lose money, which would, make them unable to pay the state. It's all speculation, for one. And two, the company itself said, no, we actually profit from this decision. This company refused to get involved. And especially because I come from the criminal defense side, where the police could get an illegal confession from someone else and use it against you. They just can't use it against that person.
Right.
And now the state can go and say, well, we're going to, try to enforce this group's rights, and that group's like, what rights? I'm good. I'm not in this. Like,
right.
Yo,
I'm not having this fight.
I'm going to get more money from this.
I don't want the smoke.
Exactly. So, the fact that the justices did this really twisty, turny way to find standing in itself bothered me.
Correct me if I'm wrong, was this the Supreme Court taking this on themselves, or did it start in a federal circuit?
So the Supreme Court doesn't take courts as an original jurisdiction, with very limited, exceptions to that. Usually they're a court of appeals. And this came from a lower court that had, enjoined this policy. And the whole thing was just kind of a mess. It also included what's called the major questions doctrine, where Congress is supposed to speak clearly about what it wants done.
I saw that. What can you explain that a little bit in detail?
Yeah, so I guess the major questions doctrine means if it's a question of great political or economic significance, Congress has to speak explicitly. So I think in this case, I guess the idea would be if Congress wanted the president to be able to forgive student loans in the sense of COVID, then Congress would pass a law saying that the president can forgive student loans because of COVID. Problem with that is that we pass laws with broad language intentionally to allow, quicker response. Also, okay, maybe you can estimate economic, I guess. I don't really think that's the place for the court, but fine, whatever. But how do you estimate political significance? Because you can make any issue political. I mean,
right.
Years ago,
we've seen that now in one way or another.
Who would have thought that the Electoral College decision would be politically controversial? So, the whole thing was just this very wishy-washy and indeterminable standards, kind of similar to some of the things that were raised with affirmative action. And so that really frustrates me that it's very clear that this was just an outcome-driven result meant to stop this administration from doing something.
And then there was the other, I guess, double whammy, the affirmative action ruling.
Mm-hmm.
Now, basically, universities can no longer consider race when accepting new students, or at least they're not obligated to do so. Affirmative action had been this piece of legislation back in the 70s, I believe, that we got it on the books, and then now it no longer is criteria for new secondary, post-secondary school students. But this one, there was a lot more. It seemed to me from the general criticism I've heard, it's still very much unclear. The schools can still continue to practice looking at race, but it's not an obligation.
Well, it's never been an obligation.
I
I think that's the first thing to clarify. Schools were allowed to do so. And in some states, they actually banned its use, period. They banned use of race, period. Those states were especially instructive because once they banned consideration of race, period, they saw a sharp decrease in, students of color. And that's not just, Black students. That's Latino students. That's Asian students. So it was never a mandate. It was always a policy that was used to try and diversify the student body.
Just to give some equity where is needed.
Well, I mean, that might be one way to phrase it. The courts, have gone through a couple different things that you were allowed to do it for. At one point, you could look to remedying history, but you couldn't look to that anymore. Most recently, it's been you can use it to build a diverse student base because that benefits everyone. It's always had this. It never wanted to acknowledge what it was. The court never really wanted it to be acknowledging that people from those groups had been set back by who they were. So, they wanted it to have something else, which was this, eventually settled on this diversity of a student body. But now they can't consider them in the holistic approach that they normally take. So normally, and Roberts lays this out even in his opinion, which is why it's so strange to me that he phrases this as completely determinative. But there's basically like 5 steps to the process that start with like your grades and scores, and they whittle it down, they whittle it down, they whittle it down. Then they like, okay, we were definitely admitting these students, and then there's like, okay, we got these slots left, and this is a whole huge process. So let's say they've got 500 spots left out of 2,000 students. And they say, okay, well, the current looks like we actually dropped like 3% in African-American students this year from last year. And you've got that, this pool of like, 1,000 students that you're like, oh, they're on the fence. So you got 500 slots left. Okay, well, we dropped an African-American, recognizing that there's different conditions that you live with growing up, recognizing that there's different interactions that you have with this country growing up. Let's, take a look and maybe, add a point to them. It was really made so that it wasn't denying people a spot based on their race. It wasn't taking a point away, but it was recognizing that we need a diverse student body for people to be prepared to enter the real world and to try and make the college campus reflective of America.
As you mentioned, it can be affirmative action was being employed in multiple areas, but how could this ruling affect employers or DEI initiatives? That's been a term that everyone's been harping on because one way or another. But how could this go into the private sector? I know that American Airlines, Match Group, Google, I think Dell also. They warned in a brief to the Supreme Court that without affirmative action, they're going to lose access to a number of future workers and business leaders, and they're going to struggle with meeting diversity hires. But do you see some of that potentially?
I definitely do. I definitely think that with this kind of ruling, so I've done some discrimination law cases, and what I think we're going to see is anytime a company has a commitment to DEI, you're going to have grounds for someone who doesn't get a job to go in and say, I didn't get it because I'm white. And they have this DEI program which shows that they favor Black and Latino people, because the court's stated goal here was that America needs to be colorblind. We can't pay attention to the fact that there's been less opportunities, less access to opportunities for, people of color. We can only think everyone has to have the same, treatment and
we
access.
don't see color.
Yeah.
But in saying that, you're also not looking at the problems that people of color.
You're not engaging with reality.
Yep.
And I mean, that comes from the justices themselves, I think, having not had to engage with those things a lot. They get to look at everything in this very abstract position of, they remove the race from it and say, if this person gets it because their skin color is this color, but this person doesn't, then it's automatically racist, when you need to include the color. You need to see that this black person getting, this recognized as getting this additional point to get into these programs or get into this job, it's because you're recognizing that in general there's a problem in our systems that they've never accounted for. It wasn't just you end slavery and boom, racism's over. You pass the Equal Rights Act, boom, racism's over. Marching across the Edmund Street Bridge, boom, racism's over. It doesn't work that way. People are still treated differently, and they just have this more subtle way that they do it sometimes. Maybe sometimes not even that subtle, to be honest. And I'll give you an example. I was in the public defender unit, primarily serving east side and west side of Buffalo, which are primarily black and Latino. We had 3 people of color in that unit. Me, an amazing public defender named Michael Mingo, who did the Know Your Rights panel with me, and another incredible public defender, Moody, who was with us every step of that way. I just want to make sure I put some respect on their names because the 2 of them are both amazing individuals.
Proper shout outs there.
Yeah. But there's over 20 attorneys in that unit. And in general, in the law, Latinos like you and me, we're 5% of it. Black people are 5 to 6% of it. That right there should show you that
While
there's
our population numbers are drastically different.
The
composition of the makeup of our society, our American society, is vastly different in percentage points.
We thank you for joining us. This has been What's Next Producers Picks. We would also like to thank all our guests this week, including Yanhong Baranski, Ryan Howze, and Nicholas Ramirez. As a reminder, What's Next airs on WBFO every weekday, 10 to 11, and re-airs each weeknight at 9 p.m. Each episode is also available wherever you get your podcasts, the Amplify BTPM app, and also on demand at WBFO.org. For What's Next, I'm Lorenzo Rodriguez. Thank you very much for listening.
This is the WBFO History Bite, bringing you a peek into significant historical events for the week of September 18th through September 24th. I'm your host, Josh Deckert. On September 19th, 1982, the Buffalo Courier-Express published its final issue. The Buffalo Evening News, now known as the Buffalo News, became the only daily newspaper in the city. On September 22nd, 1919, an estimated 7,000 workers at Lackawanna Steel went on strike during the nationwide steel strike. On September 23, 1913, the Allendale Theater officially opened. After some closures and restoration, the theater is now home to the Theater of Youth Company. And on September 24, 1950, forest fires in Canada darkened the skies of Buffalo. Residents describe the sun as changing colors due to the smoke. You've been listening to the WBFO History Bite. Discover more stories about Western New York's past on the Buffalo History Museum's website. You can learn more at buffalohistory.org. For WBFO, I'm Josh Deckert.